In September 1989, two brothers, 10-year-old Billy and 11-year-old Cole Neer, went missing while playing in David Douglas Park in Washington State.
With these little boys, these crimes are so horrible. I just shudder to even think about it.
The following month, in the neighboring state of Oregon, 4-year-old Lee Eley was abducted from his local play area. His body was discovered almost 4 weeks later.
And I knew at that moment, I go, my God, what am I gonna do? I'm afraid every minute of the day, another dead kid.
The killer was 28-year-old Wesley Allan Dodd. The unassuming shipping clerk had been abusing children for over 10 years and was ready to tell all to investigators.
You have the right to remain silent. You understand that? Yes.
And he actually built a torture rack tied with ropes that were all ready to tie the next victim down and basically torture them.
I now wrote this back. I wish I didn't have to do this. Well, he wasn't a nice kid.
Wesley Allan Dodd had confessed to being one of the world's most evil killers. The crimes of Wesley Allan Dodd shocked even the most seasoned of detectives. When the 28-year-old confessed to 3 sickening murders, it was hard for psychoanalyst Dr. Ronald Turco to imagine Dodd was capable of such depravity.
If you met this person at the gym or in the street and spoke with him, you would have no idea that he was dangerous in any way or in any way had a sexual deviation, let alone be a killer.
Homicide detective C.W. Jensen, who investigated Dodd, had a similar opinion of him.
He was a nobody, and Wesley Allan Dodd would have passed through this world with no one ever noticing him, except for that he was an evil deviant.
Dodd's stunning confessions were confirmed by a horrific diary, which he kept under lock and key.
Wesley Allan Dodd doesn't have the body count of, say, Stalin, but in his heart, he was just as bad.
This killer's story begins in the Pacific Northwest.
Wesley Dodd was born on the 3rd of July, 1961, in a place called Toppenish in Washington State.
He was kind of a geek. He wasn't real popular, but there was nothing out of the ordinary in his life.
He had a brother and a sister, and they were the favorite in the family. He was not close to his siblings.
The family moved around a lot during Dodd's childhood.
His father had a series of jobs. He'd had some health issues. His mother was going out to work. There was a lot of arguing in the family.
Dodd's home life was seemingly chaotic. In 1970, when he was 9, he had an uncomfortable moment in front of his aunts.
And he had to change his clothes in front of them and was seen in his underwear. He had never forgotten this. It was a trauma for him. He was very much embarrassed.
With a transient family life, Dodd never seemed to settle down. He was often moving schools and struggled to fit in wherever he went.
He wasn't a particularly happy child. He was a loner.
And he played in the high school band. But he did well with the clarinet. With regard to relationships to other people and band members, very little emotional interaction.
He struggled with his sexuality.
Dodd recognized from a young age that he was attracted to boys, small boys.
If you're that way at 11, you're going to be that way at 31.
As he hit adolescence, Dodd began to explore his unnatural fantasies. In May 1975, aged just 13, he began flashing at younger children in the neighborhood.
He does it from his bedroom window, and the kids go home and go, "Wesley's exposing himself to us," as we walk by his house.
If you are exposing yourself, what you are actually enjoying is the look of shock and fear on the victims' faces. Why would somebody be enjoying that? That should be problematic to us, that this is how they get their kicks, if you like.
Parents of the children reported this activity to the police, who then paid a visit to the Dodd house in July 1975. They spoke to Dodd's father, but ultimately no further action was taken.
The authorities looked upon this as less than relevant. He used that because he knew they're not going to do anything. And that was the first step in what became a progression of sexual activity with children.
He was a genuinely malevolent force because he focused his interests on tiny, completely innocent children.
Nobody's really stopping him. Nobody's giving him a strong message that this is absolutely unacceptable. He's almost trained himself that this is the way to behave, and he's starting to really enjoy it.
During his formative years, Dodd was often in trouble with the police for indecent exposure. As he matured into adulthood, his deviant urges showed no signs of slowing down. In September 1981, Dodd enlisted in the Navy, but continued to offend whenever he found an opportunity.
He continues to sexually abuse young children, and he doesn't even seem to be particularly concerned that anybody's going to hold him to account. But this time, he's a man, he's not a child himself.
Dodd was arrested in December 1982 for attempting indecent liberties on a boy, and this time was dishonorably discharged from the Navy.
He was ordered to counseling 3 or 4 different times, including the time he was discharged from the Navy. The counseling was never helpful.
In 1984, Dodd was arrested yet again for molesting a 10-year-old boy, but only received a 1-year suspended sentence. Later that year, he was convicted for molesting a 13-year-old boy. This time, the 23-year-old received a 10-year sentence, but he was soon a free man.
That sentence was reduced to just 4 months. And the reason given was that he made a very good account of himself in court. And that suggests, of course, that he is potentially a highly manipulative individual. That fits with most pedophiles. They do learn very, very quickly how to present themselves in a way that's going to get them exactly what they want.
It wasn't long before Dodd was once again in trouble with the authorities. In June 1987, the 25-year-old approached a young boy on the streets of Seattle.
Dodd attempted to abduct a boy and take him to a derelict building. The boy objected violently and ran off. But of course he could identify Dodd, and it didn't take very long indeed for the police to track Dodd down and arrest him for the charge.
Wesley Allan Dodd was back behind bars for now. When he sat down for an interview with detectives, the 25-year-old wasn't going to deny the allegations. In fact, Dodd's confession would chill investigators to the bone. In June 1987, Wesley Allan Dodd was arrested for trying to lure a child into an abandoned building. The case landed on the desk of Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Anne Bremner.
I first heard the name Wesley Allan Dodd when I was assigned his case for trial. I had a note from my supervisor, Becky Rowe, that said, and I can still remember it to this day, she wrote, "Anne, get this guy, he's scary."
Our team's goal in this case was to convict him of the highest charge possible and put him in prison for as long as we could, which at that time under the charge that we had would have been 5 years. That would have been the maximum. He was incredibly dangerous, probably the most dangerous I'd seen up to that time, and he needed to be locked up as long as we could lock him up.
But when Anne Bremner met Dodd for the first time, he didn't look like the dangerous predator she'd been warned about.
Wesley Dodd was a very kind of slight, non-imposing person. He could look to be non-threatening to a child, just in his stature and in his affects. He almost like kind of faded into the wall kind of person. He was timid, but creepy, at the same time.
The arrest report gave a shocking insight into Dodd's depravity.
This little boy was living with his mom in a motel on Aurora Avenue in Seattle. Some of the area was high for prostitution, drug dealing, things like that, but it was not a great place for a little boy to be. And so Wesley Dodd approached him.
This little boy, who I think was only 8 or 9, said no, went home, told his parents. They called the police.
The boy identified him on the street because he hung around.
It's kind of remarkable that this boy sensed that there was something wrong with this guy who had been befriending him.
It was Dodd's ensuing interview with detectives that stunned the two prosecutors the most.
He said, I wanted to touch him sexually and have him touch me. Why did he just give this full confession? I've just never seen that in my sex cases. Somebody that just felt proud of what he was going to do.
Dodd's confession was remarkable. Usually we were left to try to make arguments based on a pattern of conduct that this is what this person is going to go and do in the future if you don't lock him up. But this guy's like telling you what he's going to do if he's not locked up.
The prosecutors filed for attempted kidnapping in the first degree, which was the highest possible charge they could impose on Dodd.
We alleged attempting kidnap, which was trying to lure him away for purposes of committing a crime, a sexual assault.
But the problem with the case is that the building where he wanted to go with the boy was not a place where he could hide the little boy. And so that was a problem because kidnapping requires that the child be taken to a place where they cannot be found. What the judge found was, regardless of his intentions and his confession, he still was going to take him in a place where the child could be found.
Because of the legal aspects, the judge was obligated to require evidence of Dodd's intention.
The judge said that Dodd needed to have said something to the little boy along the lines of intending to do something sexual before the confession could be admitted.
The verdict happened with the judge. Judge says this is not a felony, it's a gross misdemeanor.
The judge also ordered him into counseling, which at that point in time would have seemed, frankly, silly and futile to me, given what this guy said in his confession.
After his probation period came to an end, 27-year-old Wesley Dodd abandoned his counseling sessions and relocated to Vancouver, Washington, where he found work as a shipping clerk. Despite a long list of felonies, Dodd was a free man. On Labor Day 1989, at David Douglas Park in Vancouver, Washington, two brothers were enjoying a day off school.
On the 4th of September, two boys, Cole and Billy Neer, were playing in the park.
Away from their parents, 10-year-old Billy and 11-year-old Cole were lured to a secluded area by a stranger.
They were riding their bikes, and he asked them in an authoritative fashion to come with him into the woods. And then he brought them in and he asked them to drop their pants. They didn't want to do it. And the older boy was very concerned, very frightened. He eventually got his clothes off, but the children were resisting.
He tied him with shoestrings. The older brother could have run away, but he wouldn't leave his brother.
After assaulting both children, the attacker wasn't finished. He produced a knife and began to stab them repeatedly.
This is a horrific crime. It's a sexual attack on boys aged 10 and 11 in a public park in broad daylight when they're literally only a few hundred yards from their own home. It is the most disgraceful, depraved crime you can imagine.
Thinking that he'd killed both brothers, the assailant fled the scene. At 2 a.m. the following morning, 11-year-old Cole's body was discovered in the park. 10-year-old Billy was found soon after the attack, still fighting for his life.
He's rushed to hospital, but sadly dies on the way.
The offender wasn't identified. Two children had been killed in broad daylight, and the attacker had got away, leaving no obvious clues.
They were just normal people out for a holiday, and these poor kids ran into the worst person at the worst time.
8 weeks later, on the 29th of October 1989, 15 miles from the murder of the Neer brothers, across the state border in Portland, Oregon, 4-year-old Lee Eley was playing with his older brother.
Lee is playing on a slide in the park. His brother is riding his bike.
Lee kind of wandered off on his own, and then he was gone.
When Lee's family discovered he was missing, police and the media immediately launched a search for the boy. Homicide detective C.W. Jensen was hoping it was a case he wouldn't have to work on.
I was eating breakfast, and I'm reading the newspaper about a missing 4-year-old boy. He had his picture in there, and I looked at my wife, and I said, "This is going to be horrible." I go, "This kid is dead." And she goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "He disappeared yesterday afternoon." I go, "It's either he's been kidnapped, killed, or he's fallen in something." I said, "I am so glad I'll have no part of this thing." And 2 hours later, it became the center of my world.
On the 1st of November, 3 days after his disappearance, the body of Lee Eley was discovered by a hunter near Vancouver Lake in Washington. He was just 4 years old. Detective Jensen was called to the crime scene.
By the time I got there, the news crews were starting. We had them back pretty far, but news crews were getting there and a lot of people watching. And I can remember walking up to the body. It was the first time I looked at him and I realized he looks like my daughter. Exactly. You know, you got to figure it out. You got to make it happen. Got to work. Got to find out who did it. You know, more kids are going to die.
At the time of this particular case, I was a detective with the Newburgh Police Department, and I worked child kidnap, child molestation, other child murder, and so on. So when this case came up, I was asked by the Portland police to become involved, and I became a part of the multi-agency task force.
And I knew there was more dead kids coming. So I called him up and I go, "Hey, Ron, FBI can't help me. Can you help me?"
Dr. Ronald Turco put together a profile of who the likely offender would be.
Mid to late 20s, would have a strong history of sexual deviation, both exposure as well as actual contact with children, that he was very clever, that he was going to be very careful, and initially he was probably committing sexual crimes without violence, but obviously there was an escalation of violence which was going to continue.
With Lee's body now recovered, investigators could try and discover what had happened to him.
So when we looked at the autopsy pictures, we could see rope, the ligatures around the neck, and other parts of his body.
There was also clear evidence of sexual assault.
I went to the autopsy, and I mean, I've been to a bunch of autopsies. Lee's post-mortem examination was reverential. It was almost like a religious service. The silence. The doctor, he was so gentle. He was just so good to him, so gentle with him. His little hair. And I knew at that moment, I go, my God, what am I going to do? Just the gravity of everything.
It was critical Detective Jensen found the person responsible fast, but there wasn't enough evidence to progress the investigation, even with an eyewitness statement from Lee's older brother.
It wasn't real clear. You had this story from the brother about Lee being around a dude in the schoolyard. It's murky. This thing is exploding in the newspaper. Once it's in the paper or on the media, you get all these calls, and you got to do something with them.
It was only a matter of time before the insatiable murderer struck again.
He was never, ever going to stop. He had to be stopped.
He was going to kill the next child. There's no question about that. No question in his mind, no question in my mind.
When you don't know what to do, you do anything. And we didn't know what to do, and we were doing everything. I'm afraid every minute of the day for another dead kid.
Time was of the essence. Every second Lee's attacker was out there, no child was safe. But fortunately for detectives, the killer was about to make a big mistake. In November 1989, a child killer was on the loose in the Pacific Northwest. The investigation was ongoing, and many suspects were questioned. But 4-year-old Lee Eley's attacker still hadn't been identified.
They have what's called a cooling off period in between all of their murders. They get to this point where they've got to kill someone, they really want to do it. But after they've killed them, they get a sense of relief and they come back down.
Less than 2 weeks after Lee's murder, a woman, accompanied by her boyfriend, took her son to see a movie.
On the 13th of November 1989, a 6-year-old boy goes to the men's room in a theatre in Camas in Washington, about 12 miles east of Vancouver, and is abducted by a man who grabs him in the men's room and carries him through the movie theatre out into the foyer.
The child was very strong, started fighting with him. They picked the child up, he's, come on, let's go. I'm going to take you for a ride. And the child was screaming all the way out, but the boyfriend began to look for the child and put 2 and 2 together. The child wasn't in the bathroom. He heard a child being carried out, so he went out and looked around.
The abductor fled the theatre, but his car broke down before he could leave the area.
Well, the boyfriend walks up and says, can I help? You've got a problem with your car.
Realizing something was far from normal, the boyfriend put the would-be abductor in a headlock and held on until the police arrived.
I think I was watching football, having a beer at home, and my partner calls me, and he said, Camas PD just grabbed a guy, tried to grab a little boy in the movie theater. He goes, we should go talk to him.
Detective Jensen arrived at the police station ready to interview the suspect. The man in front of him was identified as Wesley Allan Dodd.
Wesley Allan Dodd is a geek, so don't look for some horrible Marvel action villain to get your kid. Your kid is grabbed by a 5'7" geek, little pencil neck. That's your evil people. They're everywhere. Well, Westley was happy to tell me about the minor, at least in the judicial system, minor things he did with kids. You know, at the very end, one of the last things he said was, I abused kids, I would never hurt a kid. You know, it's just pleasantries. And then what's the deal on the movie theater? And then we talked a little bit about, well, I mean, have you done this before?
Dodd began to confess to the murder of Lee Eley, going into horrific detail about the 4-year-old's final moments.
Where he proceeded to put the 4-year-old boy through the most horrifying ordeal imaginable. He stripped him of his clothes and he tied him to the bed. He then proceeded to assault him, sexually assault him, repeatedly, and took pictures of the boy and of his assaults as trophies of what he'd done.
The sickening ordeal continued into the following day.
Eventually, he decided if he was going to go to work, he couldn't have a witness.
In a display of grotesque depravity, Dodd strangled Lee Eley to death.
If a killer uses more violence than is necessary to kill someone, or if that killer prolongs the suffering of their victim, that means they are actually enjoying the process of hurting and killing them. So they are sadists. Sadists enjoy hurting.
He burnt the clothes and he put Lee's body in a black plastic garbage bag and dumped it near Vancouver Lake, just like the rubbish.
It was a horrendous admission, but Wesley Allan Dodd was only just getting going. Without prompt, he suddenly also confessed to raping and murdering Cole and Billy Neer on Labor Day in Vancouver, Washington.
I had just gotten to the point where I believed he killed Lee Eley. Now he's admitted to everybody. And I kind of glanced at my partner like, I mean, I couldn't believe it because Vancouver police thought they had the suspect in the Near brothers' killing.
Ronald Turco also had the opportunity to sit down and interview Dodd.
I showed him my badge. I said, you know, you're under arrest. I'm a homicide detective. I'm here to talk with you. And I read his rights.
You have the right to remain silent. You understand that?
Yes.
He didn't seem like much, but he seemed like what I suspected would be the killer. It's sort of a nondescript, run-of-the-mill kind of guy, nothing special. He spoke in a very bland way.
When did you make the conscious decision you're going to have to kill him?
So 3 o'clock in the morning, I figured probably around 5:30 or so I had to kill him.
Have you already decided how you're going to do it that time?
Yeah, I decided that's what I had choke him. He was laying on top of me, and I was holding him. I got rubbed his back. I thought, I wish I didn't have to do this. It was up my skin.
Investigators knew a confession alone wouldn't guarantee a conviction. They needed hard evidence. They made the decision to get a warrant to search Dodd's apartment, which suddenly caused a shift in the 28-year-old's demeanor.
His head starts to go down. May have been a tear. And he goes, on my keychain, there's a key. It unlocks a briefcase under my bed. And in there, you'll find things about Lee and the other boys.
As officers entered Dodd's home, they had no idea what they might find. With key in hand, they slowly unlocked the briefcase under his bed, and the true extent of Wesley Allan Dodd's depravity was finally revealed. Hidden under lock and key at his home in Vancouver, Washington, detectives discovered that Wesley Allan Dodd had been keeping a diary documenting his life of sexual deviancy since his childhood.
When detectives went to search Dodd's apartment, they found, horrifyingly, Lee Eley's underpants, a whole series of pictures of Lee and other victims in an album marked Memories.
He had a whole series of photographs. That was part of his diary. He had them clipped in. And then in detail, he wrote about specifically how the murders occurred, what he did, and what he was going to do next.
These are his proudest moments. He achieved something. For Wesley Allan Dodd, his dream was killing little boys. His work that he was proud of, he wrote down. And it was all about abusing children. That was his goal. That was what he lived for. That is what he is proud of. That is what he memorialized in his pathetic little life.
Within those diaries were his plans for future attacks. This guy is incredibly determined and he's enjoying what he's doing. There's no remorse or shame or guilt. There's just, I need to repeat this because I enjoy this.
In August of 1989, he begins writing about a pact with the devil, and he actually asks Satan to help him. This is the kind of delusion that he has. It's not a psychotic delusion. He knows it's not real, but he's using everything that he can to commit murder or molestation.
The diary revealed how Dodd had tormented helpless 4-year-old Lee Eley.
With Lee, he would strangle him till he passed out. He would bring him back. I mean, he basically tortured this little kid for several hours.
Investigators searching Wesley Dodd's apartment discovered even more disturbing artifacts.
He actually built a torture rack we found in the apartment. He put together with wood boards tied with ropes that were all ready to tie the next victim down and basically torture them.
Dodd had taken photographs of his victims and he had taken trophies as well. He wanted to relive those moments, and he was making sure that he could.
After the horrific discoveries at his home, Wesley Allan Dodd was charged with murder and attempted abduction.
I said, get someone to take him to jail. I don't want to look at him, but I want to see him till I have to. And I said, I can't wait to take a shower. It's going to be a long one. I said, I've never felt more filthy in my life than I do right now, being with him.
Dodd's trial for the murders of Cole Neer, Billy Neer and Lee Eley, as well as the attempted murder of the 6-year-old boy he tried to abduct from the movie theater, began in May 1990 at the Clark County Superior Court. Despite his earlier confessions, Dodd pled not guilty to all the charges.
We were pretty well prepared. I mean, the defense did the best they could, but it was, a fait accompli that he was guilty.
He was, as usual, bland, not responsive, seemed to be interested in what was going on, about as interested as you might be in maybe watching a movie.
Even without his confessions, the evidence against Dodd was overwhelming, and in June 1990, he changed his plea to guilty. On July the 14th, a jury concluded that he should be sentenced to death. During his time on death row, Dodd astonishingly launched a safety campaign for children.
He went on this one-man redemption tour where it was like, I'm a really awful person, so tell your kids not to talk to awful people like me. I don't need to hear that from you, Wes. Be careful with your kids around strangers. But he went on this media tour from jail, and of course the reporters were only too happy to do the story. And so he enjoyed that bit of notoriety.
Dodd even produced a leaflet to help parents keep their children away from predators like himself.
He writes a leaflet saying that he has this special insight in how to keep children safe. And he's almost saying that he's doing this as some kind of atonement. There's nothing in there that has the slightest bit of insight. It's all of the safety advice that we have been giving to children for years. But what he's actually done is he's kept up that communication with children even behind bars, because that's all he lives for. And that's the most outrageous, egregious thing I've ever seen, that he was able to get that out of the prison walls at all.
In January 1993, it was time for Dodd to pay the ultimate price for his crimes. Reporters gathered at Washington State Penitentiary to witness the execution. Dodd's father said, "Of course I still love Wes. He's my son. But my love for him doesn't alter the facts of what he's done. He's guilty of a horrible crime and should pay the penalty prescribed by law."
I probably could have gone to the execution. I don't know. I put him there. What's the point of seeing him there? I did my job. You guys do your job. But that being said, you show me a guy that kills little kids, kill him.
Just after midnight on the 5th of January 1993, 31-year-old Wesley Allan Dodd was executed by hanging.
Dodd was given the opportunity of choosing between a lethal injection or hanging. Dodd chose to be hanged because he'd hanged Lee Eley in his closet in his apartment. Very measured, very Dodd, all carefully calculated. Okay, well, if I'm going to die, I want to die in the way I choose.
So he's gone, but he went out his way.
Dodd's execution meant that parents across the Pacific Northwest could sleep a little easier. Had he been stopped sooner, 3 children would not have been taken so young.
I've never had a case that had the unique blend of somebody stating their intent to committing these crimes if they weren't locked up. You know, he had enough self-awareness of how evil he was. We did everything that we could have done to try to stop him within our law.
These crimes were so horrible with these little boys. I just shudder to even think about it. It's just the worst I've seen in my entire career. And I've, prosecuted murder cases, sexual assault cases, death cases. He was about as scary as they come.
Dodd was an absolutely unrepentant paedophile who, had he not been caught, almost by accident in that movie theatre in Camas, would have gone on to rape and kill other boys.
The case was so disturbing for C.W. Jensen that the crimes of Wesley Allan Dodd remain a nightmare that will haunt him forever.
I left homicide a little over a year after Lee Eley case. I would think, please don't give me another kid. I'll take anything, no more kids. And I said, I'm done. When you talk about evil people, it's a gradient. It's subjective. But you got to be a sleazebag to kill little kids. It's not body count. It's just the evil and the malice that comes with it. He wasn't the scariest guy I ever met, but he was the worst guy I ever met.
Dodd was a twisted paedophile who could not control his unnatural urges. His crimes escalated from flashing to kidnap, and ultimately from torture to murder. His shocking confessions will live long in the memory of the detectives who interrogated him, while he spoke candidly about killing 3 innocent victims whose lives he took away before they'd had the chance to begin. Wesley Allan Dodd is undoubtedly one of the world's most evil killers.
It started with a phone call no one expected. 2:37 a.m. A cold line crackled in the dark silence of the night, slicing through the stillness of a small town asleep under rain. The officer on duty, half awake, reached for the receiver. A man's voice whispered, trembling, broken, "I did something. A long time ago." Then silence. A click. The call ended. No name, no address, only fear. The words hung in the air like smoke. Within minutes, the station lights flickered to life. Boots hit the floor, and a ghost from 26 years ago came back to haunt everyone who thought the nightmare was over. Back then, in 1999, the case had a name that every house whispered: the Hollow Creek disappearance. A 19-year-old college student, Emma Blake, vanished after a late-night shift at a diner on Route 47. Her car was found parked neatly by the bridge driver's door, open keys still in the ignition, her phone on the seat. No signs of struggle. No blood. No trace. Just emptiness. For years, her face lingered on missing posters bleached by rain and sunlight. Eyes fading smile, dissolving into paper. The town moved on, or tried to, until that call. Detective Laura Nash, who'd inherited the file when she joined the force 15 years later, had never seen a case eat away at people like this one. She knew the bridge, the diner, the mother who still left the porch light on every night. It wasn't just an investigation anymore, it was a wound. So when that voice resurfaced, she didn't hesitate. She reopened the file, spread the yellowed pages across her desk, and the ghosts began to whisper again. The voice had been traced partially, a payphone abandoned behind a gas station cameras long gone. Rain had washed away everything, prints, footprints, any hope of clarity, but something about the tone, the hesitation. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Like someone who had been running from himself for decades and finally stumbled. By dawn, the team began digging. Old reports, forgotten witness statements, tapes buried under dust. They played the original 911 call. From that night, a truck driver had claimed he saw a girl standing by the bridge railing, but when patrols arrived, there was nothing. The driver was dismissed, at the time drunk, unreliable. But Laura listened again. The man's voice shook. In the background, faintly a sound of footsteps, 2 sets, not one. A detail missed. Ignored, filed away. As the rain eased that morning, Hollow Creek woke to headlines it never wanted to see again. Cold case reopened. After 26 years, people whispered at breakfast counters, coffee shops buzzed with fragments of memory. The owner of the diner, Old, now said he could still remember Emma's laughter echoing through the kitchen that last night, like wind chimes before a storm. Others recalled rumors, a jealous ex-boyfriend, a stranger who'd come through town, the shadow of a car idling by the bridge after midnight. Everyone had a theory. No one had an answer. Detective Nash and her team started retracing Emma's final hours. They found her uniform stored in evidence, neatly folded, faint scent of detergent still clinging to it. Her diary recovered from her apartment contained the last entry. He said he wants to meet. Says he knows something about my father. The handwriting was hurried, uneven, like she'd been scared or late for something. But who was he? Emma's father had died when she was 8. There was no record of anyone contacting her about him. That line became an obsession. They visited her mother, Margaret Blake, now frail, but sharp eyes red from years of crying that never really ended. She didn't seem surprised that the police were back. "I knew it wasn't over," she whispered. "Someone's been calling me, breathing on the line, for years." Laura froze. "You mean recently?" Margaret nodded. "Always on the anniversary, November 14th. No words, just breathing." The pattern matched. Every year, around the same date, a single anonymous call, logged by the phone company, lasting less than 10 seconds. It wasn't harassment. It was ritual. A haunting reminder. Whoever made those calls wasn't done with his guilt or his fear. As night fell, the small team gathered near the old bridge. Floodlights carved through the fog. The water below shimmered like black glass. Laura leaned on the railing where Emma's car once stood. It was quiet, except for the hum of the river. Then she noticed something faint scratches on the metal guardrail, almost erased by time, but still visible under her flashlight. 4 lines, a pause, then one more, 4 and 1, a tally. Someone had been marking something here long ago. She took photos, heart pounding. Back at the station, forensic technicians examined the photos. The spacing, the pressure, it was deliberate. The last line was carved deeper, as if the person's hand had shaken. Maybe Emma had been here leaving her final mark. Or maybe someone else had counting victims, or years, or something darker. The scratches became a symbol proof that something happened at that very spot, something that never left. The next morning, a new lead surfaced. A retired officer, Tom Keller, now living 2 towns over, reached out after seeing the news. He said he remembered a man from back then, Daniel Hart, a mechanic who used to frequent the diner. Quiet, polite, but with a temper that flared without warning. Emma once complained he'd followed her home after work, but the report was never filed properly. Keller admitted the department had brushed it off. "We thought it was nothing," he said, guilt thick in his voice. But he left town right after she disappeared. They ran the name. No current address, no driver's license renewal, but his social security number had been used last month in a hospital in another state, Ohio. Someone had checked in under that identity after a car accident. Age 51. Condition stable. Laura didn't hesitate. She boarded a flight the same day. When she arrived at the hospital, she found him in room 302. Gray hair, gaunt face eyes, sunken deep. The monitor beeped steadily beside him. For a moment, he didn't recognize her badge, but then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You found me," he said softly. She sat down. "We got a call from someone who sounded like you." He looked away. Maybe it was me. Maybe it wasn't. After a while, the voice in your head starts calling for you. Her pulse quickened. "Tell me about Emma Blake." His hand trembled on the blanket. She wasn't supposed to die. The room went silent. He started to speak halting, broken phrases. He said he'd met her that night, yes. Said she'd confronted him about something he'd done for her father, something to do with money debts, promises he couldn't keep. He claimed there was an argument. She slipped, hit her head on the railing. Panic took over. He left her by the bridge thinking she was gone. But when he returned hours later, she was gone for real. No body, no trace. Laura asked, "Why call now?" His eyes welled with tears. "Because she won't stop. Every night she's there. In the hallway. In the mirror. I thought confessing would make it stop." Then he leaned closer. "But you'll never find her, because she never left." His words froze her blood. Security footage from the hospital later showed something that made no sense at 3:04 a.m., the same time the anonymous confession call had been placed days earlier. The man in room 302 was alone asleep. Yet a call from his hospital phone was made to Hollow Creek Police Department. Exactly the same message. Exactly the same voice. The hospital confirmed no one entered or left his room at that time. The corded phone lay untouched beside him. When Laura played the recording, her hands shook. The static cleared, and amid the silence, she heard it again. "I did something a long time ago, but this time there was a whisper that followed almost imperceptible. Help me." And behind that faint, distant, a woman's voice, crying. No one could explain it. Not the techs, not the hospital, not even Laura herself. But she felt it. The air shifting, the bridge calling, the past clawing its way back through time. Outside, the night bled into dawn once more. Rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. Somewhere in the distance, Hollow Creek stirred a town waking up to the sound of its own buried secrets. And in the police evidence room beneath layers of dust, the photograph of Emma Blake, the one pinned to her missing person file, had fallen from the wall overnight, face down. The cold case wasn't just reopened. It was alive again. The next morning, Detective Laura Nash stood in the evidence room, staring at the fallen photo. The edges were curled, the colors fading, but Emma Blake's smile still pierced through the years, calm, almost knowing. She picked it up carefully, brushing away the dust. For a moment, the silence in the room thickened, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Somewhere deep inside her, something whispered that this case wasn't about what had happened. It was about what refused to die. She reopened the box marked Case Hash 4799. Inside were items sealed decades ago, a silver bracelet engraved with a cassette tape, labeled Bridge Recordings, and a manila folder filled with reports written by hands long retired or buried. She placed the photo back, but as she turned to leave, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. A faint thump echoed from the back shelves. She froze. The door behind her creaked open, but no one was there. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind that peculiar silence that only follows a storm. The river glimmered beneath the bridge like a dark mirror. Laura drove there alone, headlights slicing through the mist. The bridge loomed ahead, rusted guardrails streaked with moss, the asphalt cracked from years of frost and neglect. She parked in the exact same spot where Emma's car was found 26 years earlier. She stepped out her shoes, crunching on gravel, the air cold enough to bite. Her flashlight beam swept across the guardrail, the same scratches she'd seen before. But now, something else caught her eye. Beneath the metal rail, nearly hidden by a layer of mud and moss, there was a fragment of fabric, torn, faded blue. She reached down, prying it free carefully. Denim, old, brittle, but unmistakably human-made. She slipped it into a plastic bag, marking it for forensics. Then she noticed something else: footprints. Not hers. Fresh ones pressed into the damp earth near the riverbank, bare, small, almost childlike. They led down toward the water and stopped at the edge. Her radio crackled. "Detective Nash, you copy? We've got something." Back at the station, the forensic team had analyzed the scratches from the railing. The marks weren't random. They formed letters, faint, jagged, but readable under digital enhancement. 4 characters, D-A-N-Y. Laura's heart sank. Danny, Emma's younger brother. He'd been 8 years old when she vanished. The same boy who used to wait for her after her shifts, who'd drawn pictures of her on the sidewalk for weeks after she disappeared. He'd moved away years later, changed his name, never spoke to anyone again. She picked up the phone. "Daniel Blake." A pause on the other end, then a low, steady voice. "I knew you'd call." He told her he'd been having nightmares. The same one over and over. A girl standing on the bridge in the rain calling his name. "I see her face," he said, "but sometimes it's not her, it's me." Laura booked a flight to Oregon, where he lived under a new identity. When she arrived, Daniel looked like a man both young and old, at once tired eyes, shaking hands, an air of someone who had spent his life running from shadows that never stopped following. His small apartment was dim curtains, drawn tight, filled with drawings, sketches of a woman by a bridge, a river, the same scene over and over, drawn hundreds of times. He poured coffee with trembling hands. "I used to hear her," he said quietly. "At first I thought it was memory, but then I realized she's trying to tell me something about that night." Laura showed him the photo of the scratches, D-A-N-Y. He stared at it for a long time. "That's how she used to spell my name. She'd write it on napkins, lunch notes. She always said she liked it without the I." His voice cracked. "You think she wrote that?" "I think she tried to," Laura said. "Maybe she wanted to leave something for you." He nodded, slowly. Then he said something that made her heart stop. "There was someone else that night. I saw a car following her once. Same one every time, black Ford pickup. I told Mom, but she said it was just someone from the diner. I remember the plate. It had a number, the 307 maybe. I think about it all the time." Back in Hollow Creek, Laura pulled the old DMV records. It took hours, but there it was, a 1998 Ford F-150 registered to Daniel Hart, the same man from the hospital. But the records showed another name on the insurance: Margaret Blake, Emma's mother. For a second, the room seemed to tilt. She called Margaret immediately. The line rang once, twice, then click. A voice answered. But it wasn't Margaret's. It was faint, echoing, distorted. "She knows," it whispered. Then silence. Laura raced to the Blake house, heart pounding. The porch light was still on, the one Margaret had promised never to turn off until Emma came home. The door was ajar. Inside the living room was empty lights, dimmed, a cup of tea cold on the table. On the wall hung dozens of photos. Emma at school, Emma at graduation, Emma by the bridge, but one frame was missing, a pale rectangle of dust where it had once hung. She called out, "Margaret." A sound came from upstairs, slow footsteps, then a whisper, "She's here." Laura climbed the stairs, gun drawn. The bedroom door was open. Margaret sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the missing photo frame to her chest. Her eyes were red, but her voice was calm. "I told you she never left." Laura lowered her weapon. "Mrs. Blake, we need to talk about Daniel Hart." Margaret looked at her with something between sadness and fury. "You think I didn't know? He helped me after my husband died, fixed the house, spent time with Emma. I thought he was kind." Her lips trembled. Then she told me he wasn't. "What do you mean?" "She said he made her a promise. Said he'd show her the truth about her father. But when she came home that night, she was crying. She wanted to tell the police. I told her we'd handle it, but I never saw her again." Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "I called him that night. I begged him to tell me where she was. He said, 'She's gone and you'll never find her.'" And then he hung up. Laura's voice softened. "Why didn't you tell the police?" "Because I thought he'd kill me too." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, rolling across the valley. Margaret handed Laura the photo frame. Inside was the missing picture Emma on the bridge, smiling, taken just a week before she vanished. But behind the photo, taped to the back, was a small piece of paper, old yellowed, written in Emma's handwriting. "He said Dad owed him something. Said I'd pay instead." Laura froze. "Do you know what your husband owed him?" Margaret nodded weakly. "Money. But not just that. He used to work with Hart on construction jobs. There was an accident, someone died. They covered it up. Hart said he'd keep the secret if we paid him. We couldn't. After my husband died, he came for Emma." The room went silent. The clock ticked softly, the only sound left in the world. Laura left with the note sealed in evidence. As she walked to her car, she felt eyes watching from somewhere unseen. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers she couldn't quite understand. At the lab, forensics confirmed the fabric from the bridge matched the jeans Emma was wearing that night, and embedded in the threads microscopic traces of blood, but not hers. Male. The DNA profile came back within hours. It wasn't Daniel Hart's. It wasn't her father's. It was Margaret Blake's. The revelation hit like lightning. The blood was old, partial degraded, but it was enough. The story that had lived for decades was unraveling fast. Laura drove back to the house that night. Sirens off, headlights dimmed. The porch light was still on. The door was still open. Inside, the house was empty. But on the table sat a single envelope with her name on it. She tore it open. Inside was a letter, shaky handwriting, ink smeared by tears. "I couldn't live with it anymore. She fell, and I tried to save her. Hart helped me hide it. I thought I was protecting her. But I've been living in the dark ever since. Please tell her I'm sorry. Tell her the light can go off now." Laura ran upstairs, but Margaret was gone. The window was open. The curtains swayed in the wind. Outside, the rain began again, heavy, endless. Down by the bridge, emergency lights flickered in the distance. A body had been found in the river, washed up against the rocks. It was Margaret Blake. In her hand, still clutched tight, was Emma's silver bracelet. The town of Hollow Creek went silent again. News crews swarmed. Headlines screamed, "Cold case confession ends in tragedy." But for Detective Laura Nash, it wasn't over. There were still questions, the second voice on the tape, the footprints by the river, the phone calls that came from nowhere. Because some nights when the wind rises over the bridge, the station phone still rings once, just once, at 2:37 a.m. And on the other end, a voice whispers, "I did something a long time ago." The river kept its secrets well. 2 days after Margaret Blake's body was pulled from the rocks, Hollow Creek fell into a strange silence, the kind that feels heavier than grief, like the air itself remembers too much. The town buried her quietly, no ceremony, no eulogy. Only rain, the same rain that had fallen the night Emma disappeared. The same rain that seemed to return every time the truth came close. Detective Laura Nash stood by the grave coat-drenched hair clinging to her face. The sound of the priest's voice faded into the distance. Her mind wasn't here. It was back at the bridge, at that cursed railing, at the whisper that kept replaying in her head. "Help me." Something was wrong. Margaret's confession didn't match the evidence. The blood pattern on the denim, the trajectory, the bruising, it didn't add up to an accident. Margaret had been covering something, yes, but not her own crime. Someone else's. And whoever that someone was, they were still out there. At the station, the forensics lab had finished one last test on the bracelet found in Margaret's hand. Beneath her fingerprints, there was another set, faint, partial, but traceable. The system ran it through CODIS. Minutes later, the computer beeped a match. Daniel Hart. Laura stared at the screen. Hart was still in the Ohio hospital under police watch. When she called to confirm, the nurse on duty hesitated. "Detective, I thought you knew." "Mr. Hart? Passed away last night?" The line buzzed with static. "He coded at exactly 2:37 a.m. Laura's breath caught. What? Heart failure, sudden, no warning signs. She didn't respond, didn't hang up. She just stood there, the hum of the fluorescent lights echoing around her like a pulse. 2:37 a.m., the same minute as the phone call. The same time every year, the same voice. She played the hospital surveillance footage again, this time frame by frame. At 2:36:58, Hart's heart monitor spiked violently. The lights flickered. And for exactly 2 seconds, his reflection in the window, the faint outline of his body, was joined by another shape. Smaller, feminine, a shadow standing beside him. Then, the power surged back, and it was gone. That night, Laura didn't go home. She drove to the diner, the one where Emma had worked. The place was still open, same neon sign, same cracked tiles, same hum of the jukebox that hadn't changed since the 90s. She sat at the counter, ordered black coffee, and stared at the stool near the end, the one Emma used to sit on after shifts, counting her tips, writing in her diary. The waitress, an older woman with silver hair and tired eyes, noticed her badge. "You looking into that girl again?" Laura nodded. The woman sighed. "You know she was here that night. Said she was waiting for someone. Man never showed. I remember because she left a note. Told me if anyone asked to tell him she was going to the bridge." Laura froze. "Do you still have it?" The woman frowned, thinking. "Back then, I used to keep everything. I'm a bit of a hoarder." She disappeared into the back and returned with an old biscuit tin filled with receipts, faded Polaroids, and scraps of paper. She rummaged through it, then pulled out a folded napkin yellowed with time. Laura unfolded it carefully. The ink was blurred but legible. "Meet me by the bridge, 11:45. You said you'd tell me everything. No signature, just an initial M." Laura stared at it. "Margaret," she whispered. But the waitress shook her head. "No, that's not her handwriting. Margaret always wrote in cursive. This is print, block letters. See that little hook on the M? That's how men write. It's different, stronger." Laura slipped the napkin into an evidence bag, her mind spinning. If the EM wasn't Margaret, then who Hart's middle name was Michael? His handwriting from the old mechanic's forms matched perfectly. She drove back to the bridge again, headlights cutting through the mist. It was midnight. The river was swollen from the rain, the current fast and merciless. She stood by the railing, holding the napkin, staring into the dark water below. Every instinct told her to leave, but something else kept her there. The wind picked up low and hollow like a whisper running along the guardrail. Then, somewhere beneath it, a sound faint rhythmic, a tapping, metal against metal. She followed it to the underside of the bridge, climbed down carefully with her flashlight. The beam caught something glinting in the mud. A locket. Silver, heart-shaped, half-buried. She picked it up, wiped off the dirt. Inside was a photo. Emma on one side, Daniel Blake on the other. And on the back engraved words barely visible through the tarnish. "We keep each other safe." She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, the river roaring below. She climbed back up, adrenaline spiking. The moment her boots hit the asphalt, her radio screeched to life. "Detective Nash, we've got movement at the Blake residence." Sensors triggered inside the house. She jumped into the car sirens, silent, speeding through the fog. When she arrived, the porch light was still on. The door swung open with a slow, familiar creak. Inside the living room, lights flickered weakly. The air felt colder, heavier. On the floor, muddy footprints, small bare, leading from the front door to the staircase. The same kind she'd seen by the river. She followed them up. At the top of the stairs, they stopped outside Emma's old bedroom. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. The room was untouched, frozen in time. Posters on the wall, makeup scattered on the vanity, an unmade bed still draped in faded pink sheets. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. But on the desk, something new, a cassette tape identical to the one in the evidence box labeled in shaky handwriting, "Play Me." She slipped it into her recorder, pressed play. Static. Then a voice, faint distant. Not Emma's, not Hart's. It was Margaret. "If you're hearing this, it means you found the bridge. You found him. I need you to understand. I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting my son. Laura's blood ran cold. Daniel saw everything that night. He thought it was an accident, but it wasn't. Hart wanted to scare her. He grabbed her. She fought back. She fell, but she was alive. She was calling for help. I went to the bridge. I heard her voice, and then I saw Daniel. He was holding the rock." The tape cracked, warped by age, but the words were clear enough. I couldn't lose him too. So I told the police. She ran away. Hart helped me hide her. He promised to keep the secret if I paid him. I did every year until he came back. He said he wanted to confess. I told him no one would believe him. He said it didn't matter anymore. She was coming for us both. The tape ended abruptly. Laura sat there, heart pounding, the truth clawing its way through decades of lies. Emma hadn't died at Hart's hands. She'd died by accident at her brother's, a child's panic, a mother's desperate cover-up, a lifetime of guilt. And yet, one thing still didn't make sense. The calls, the voice, the second whisper. She looked up. The mirror on Emma's vanity was fogging slowly like breath. Then, as she watched, words began to form across the glass, written by something unseen. He's not done. The power cut out. The house plunged into darkness. Her flashlight flickered back to life, just enough to see the reflection behind her. For a split second, a shape in the mirror, tall male standing in the doorway, then gone. She drew her gun, spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, the air still. Only the faint smell of river water and something metallic, sharp like blood. She backed toward the door, pulse racing. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed a photo frame on the floor. Cracked glass. It was a family picture, Margaret, Emma, and Daniel. But Daniel's face had been scratched out, deeply, repeatedly. Outside, thunder cracked, rattling the windows. Downstairs, the phone rang. Once, twice. She grabbed it. "Detective Nash," she said. Static. Then a whisper male, trembling. "You shouldn't have come here." The line went dead. She ran outside, scanning the woods with her flashlight. A dark figure was moving along the tree line, barely visible through the rain. Tall, limping, heading toward the river. Laura chased after him, mud splashing her breath sharp in the cold night air. She shouted, "Stop, police!" The figure didn't turn. Just kept walking until it reached the edge of the bridge where the wind howled and the world seemed to tilt. When she finally caught up, she saw the man's face illuminated by lightning, Daniel Blake. He looked hollow, haunted eyes wide with something between terror and relief. "She's not gone," he whispered. "She won't let me sleep." "Daniel," Laura said softly, lowering her weapon. "It was an accident. You were a child." He shook his head. "No, she was alive when I left. Someone else was there after me." "Who?" He looked at her, tears mixing with rain. "You already know." And before she could speak, he stepped back over the edge. Laura lunged, but it was too late. His body vanished into the darkness below. She leaned over the railing. Breath ragged the sound of the river roaring beneath. Then she saw it, faint, impossible, the two figures beneath the water drifting side by side. A woman in blue, a man reaching for her hand. Then the current took them both. Back at the station, the file was closed once again. Official report suicide following confession. Case resolved. But Laura couldn't sleep. Because every night since that storm, the bridge appeared in her dreams, and the phone on her desk still rings at 2:37 a.m. 2. Only now the voice on the line no longer says, "I did something." It says, "You're next." The morning after Daniel Blake's death, Hollow Creek looked unchanged, but something in the air felt wrong, off balance, like the town itself was holding its breath. Detective Laura Nash hadn't slept. Her hands still smelled faintly of river water, and the sound of the current echoed in her head long after she left the bridge. She sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the phone, the one that rang every night at 2:37 a.m. It was silent now, too silent. The department had already declared the case closed. The file was thick with signatures sealed under the phrase "concluded investigation." But Laura couldn't stop reading it over and over. Emma Blake's photo. Daniel's school reports Margaret's confession, Hart's autopsy. It didn't add up. None of it did. Every time she thought she reached the truth, it dissolved like mist in the light. She poured another coffee, hands trembling slightly. On her desk sat the old cassette labeled "Play Me," the one with Margaret's voice. She'd listened to it 12 times. But this morning, she noticed something strange. The tape length was exactly 30 minutes. The recording ended at 29:58, 2 seconds missing. She replayed the last moments, turned the volume up. Beneath the static, faint but clear, came a second voice, a whisper, not Margaret's. "She's not the last." The words slid into her mind like ice. She froze, leaning closer to the speaker. There was no mistaking it. A male voice, low, rasping, filled with fear or warning. She rewound, played it again. The same phrase, the same tone, only this time at the end a faint sound, a click. Like a phone being hung up. She sent the audio to the lab for spectral analysis. Hours later, the technician called back, voice shaky. Detective, this might sound crazy, but that second voice, it's not from the same environment. Different frequency range, almost like it was recorded over another signal. We traced the background noise. It's a phone line, landline. And guess where it came from? Laura's pulse quickened. Where? Hollow Creek Police Department, extension 104. Her own desk. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, check the system logs. Was any outgoing call made from that extension the night the tape was found? The technician hesitated. Yes, ma'am. One outgoing call, 2:37 a.m. She hung up the blood draining from her face. Outside, clouds gathered over the town again, dark and heavy. She drove to the river. The bridge loomed ahead like a scar that never healed. She parked, walked toward the railing, the same spot where Emma's car once waited. The wind screamed through the hollow beams. The scratches she'd found before DANY were still there, but now she noticed something new. Beneath them, fresh marks, deeper, newer, letters carved crudely into the metal. NASH. Her name. Her breath caught. She stepped back, heart hammering. Someone had been here, recently, watching, waiting. She scanned the area, hand on her weapon. Nothing. Only the echo of water slapping against rock. She returned to the station, pulled the security footage from the bridge camera installed a month earlier. The timestamp flickered, distorted by fog and static, but the image was clear enough at 2:36 a.m. the night before a figure had stood by the railing for almost 5 minutes, motionless. Then it turned toward the camera. The face was obscured by rain, but the shape of the body, tall, lean, unmistakably male, matched someone she knew. Her own reflection froze on the monitor as she whispered his name. Tom Keller, the retired officer, the one who'd first mentioned Daniel Hart. She searched the archives. Keller had been the first responder on the night Emma disappeared. His old reports were brief, almost careless, describing no sign of struggle. But one page stood out, a supplemental note never entered into evidence, dated the next day. It mentioned unidentified female remains spotted by a fisherman downstream, but dismissed after heavy rain made retrieval impossible. The report was unsigned. Laura drove straight to Keller's address, a small farmhouse outside town, overgrown with ivy mailbox leaning sideways. She knocked once, twice. No answer. Through the window, she saw movement, a flicker of light. She drew her gun, pushed the door open. Inside smelled of damp wood and cigarettes. The living room walls were covered with newspaper clippings, missing girl, Hollow Creek, mystery cold case reopened. Detective Nash revisits bridge. Dozens of headlines pinned like trophies. Keller, she called. A floorboard creaked upstairs. She climbed slowly, gun raised. The hallway was narrow wallpaper peeling in strips. At the end of it, a door stood ajar, light spilling through the crack. She nudged it open. The room was lined with file boxes, old police records, photos, cassette tapes. On the desk, a radio scanner crackled faintly, looping the same police dispatch audio from 1999. Unit 3 responding possible jumper, Hollow Creek Bridge, over and over. And in the center of the desk, a phone. Old rotary model, black heavy, the same kind used in the station decades ago. The line was connected, the dial tone buzzed softly. Yeah, they eat. Her hand hovered above it, then it rang. She flinched once, twice, the same rhythm. She lifted the receiver slowly. Detective Nash, she whispered. A deep breath on the other end, then Keller's voice thin and trembling. You shouldn't be here. Where are you, Tom? Where it started. Click. The line went dead. She spun around, scanning the room. On the wall above the desk hung a map of Hollow Creek. Red pins marked every location tied to the case, the diner, the bridge, Emma's house. But there was one pin she'd never seen before. Deep in the woods near the old quarry, labeled only with 2 words, the well. She left immediately. The drive took 20 minutes through winding forest roads, slick with rain. The quarry had been abandoned for years, flooded, halfway surrounded by rusting fences. She followed the dirt path until the trees opened to a clearing, and there it was, a stone well, ancient and cracked, covered in moss. a small wooden cross stuck in the ground beside it. No name, no dates, just the initials EB. Laura knelt beside it, shining her flashlight into the darkness. Water glistened far below. She tossed in a pebble. It fell for a long time before the faint splash echoed back. She turned and saw him. Tom Keller stood at the tree line, pale-soaked eyes wild. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in years. "You found it?" he said softly. "Tell me what happened, Tom." He shook his head. "We were kids then. Cops with no idea what we were doing. When we found her car, she was already gone. Hart said he saw something in the river, so we followed the trail here. And we found her. She was alive, barely. Hart panicked, said we couldn't save her, that it would ruin us. He made me swear." "Swear to what?" "To bury it." Her flashlight trembled in her hand. She was here. He nodded. "We lowered her down. Thought it would end there. But it didn't. Every year the phone rings. Same time, same voice. Why my desk?" He stared at her eyes hollow. "Because you reopened it. Because now she's calling you." The wind howled through the trees, carrying a low sound, a hum, almost like a voice singing through the stone. Laura stepped closer to the well. "Tom, we need to call this in. Get the forensics team." But when she turned back, he was gone. His footsteps trailed toward the woods, vanishing into the dark. She ran after him, branches whipping against her arms, the beam of her flashlight dancing wildly. Then gunfire, one shot echoing across the valley. She found him moments later, slumped against a tree gun in his hand, eyes staring toward the sky. On his wrist, a silver bracelet identical to Emma's. Carved into the bark beside him were 4 words: "She's not at peace." The forensics team drained part of the well 2 days later. At the bottom, wrapped in a weather-worn tarp, they found what was left of a body. Dental records confirmed it: Emma Blake. The official report declared the case solved. The town breathed again, for a while. But Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unfinished. Every night, she replayed Keller's final words, "Because now she's calling you." She moved the old evidence box to her apartment. The cassette tapes, the photos, the locket. She told herself it was for closure. But sometimes, when the clock struck 2:37, the phone beside her bed buzzed once a brief, hollow tone. No number, no caller ID, just silence. And if she listened closely enough, through the static, through the hum of the night, she could hear breathing. Slow, steady, patient, waiting. Detective Laura Nash didn't believe in hauntings. Not really. But belief stops mattering when evidence begins to behave like memory. Every page she turned in the Blake file felt alive, as if the ink itself remembered being written under duress. She kept the box in her apartment, now stacked beside the kitchen table. The station was too loud, too full of people pretending the case was finished. At home, she could listen to the tape, to the silence, to whatever still tried to speak through the gaps. 3 nights after Keller's death, the calls started again. Always at 2:37 a.m., always one ring. Never more. She'd wake before the sound, fully formed heart, already racing eyes fixed on the red glow of the clock. Once she answered. There was only static until a breath slipped through long and uneven, like someone trying to decide whether to talk or cry. Then it stopped. Sleep deserted her. She spent dawn combing through Keller's recovered files. Among the yellowed papers, she found a photograph she'd never seen before, the original crime scene shot of the bridge taken the night Emma disappeared. In the far corner of the frame, barely visible under grain and shadow, was the outline of a second car. Not Emma's, not Hart's. The license plate reflected half a number, 479. The same sequence appeared on an old municipal vehicle record, Hollow Creek Police unmarked sedan assigned to Officer Thomas Keller. He'd been there before the call came in, before anyone knew she was gone. Laura's stomach tightened. She flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink were 3 words. She wasn't alone. The next morning, she drove to evidence storage. The clerk hesitated before handing her the box. Someone had already signed it out 2 days earlier. Signature Lieutenant D. Price, her own superior. Price had been the one to push the department to close the file quickly after Keller's death. "The town needs peace," he'd said. Let it rest. She didn't ask permission. She went straight to his office. Price looked up from his paperwork, expression calm, unreadable. Detective Nash, you look like hell. Who gave you authorization to reopen the evidence? He folded his hands. I didn't reopen anything. I archived it. Properly. You've been keeping materials off-site, which violates procedure. She stepped closer. You knew Keller was at the bridge that night. You signed the patrol logs. He sighed. Laura, every cop in this town has ghosts. Keller carried his until it killed him. Don't make them yours. She dropped the photograph on his desk. Then explain this. He glanced at it once, jaw tightening. That picture was never meant for the file. What's in the part that was cut? Nothing you need to see. His eyes flicked to the phone on the corner of his desk. The old landline, same model as Keller's. For a second, she thought she heard it hum. Go home, Nash, he said. That's an order. She left before she said something she couldn't take back. Outside, the afternoon light felt wrong, too bright, too thin, like the town itself had been drained of color. She drove without thinking past the diner, past the church, until the bridge appeared again through the fog. The guardrail glinted wetly. The letters carved into the metal Nash were deeper now, fresh. She touched the grooves with her fingertips. The metal was warm. That night, she packed her things from the apartment. The phone kept ringing once, twice. Each time she unplugged it, it rang again. Finally, she ripped the cord from the wall. Silence, relief. Until the cassette player on the table clicked itself on. Margaret Blake's voice filled the room. He made me swear. Laura froze. She hadn't touched the tape. She crossed the room slowly, hand trembling as she pressed stop. The reels spun once more before halting like a breath catching mid-sentence. She sat on the couch head in her hands, trying to breathe. The city clock outside struck 3. Her phone, now battery-powered, buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Look under the bridge. She stared at it. The letters burning on the screen. By 3:20 a.m., she was there. Headlights off. The moonlight turned the river to liquid silver. She climbed down the embankment with a flashlight and followed the muddy slope beneath the bridge. The air smelled of rust and algae. Something metallic caught her beam, a padlocked steel hatch embedded in the concrete pillar. She crouched, brushed away the moss. Faint stenciling above it read Maintenance Access HCPD, police property. She cut the lock with a pry tool from her trunk. The door groaned open, exhaling a stale, damp breath from the hollow space beneath the bridge. A narrow stairway spiraled downward into darkness. Her radio crackled to life on its own frequency. Unit 3 responding, the same dispatch Keller's recorder had looped. She descended. The steps ended in a small chamber, concrete walls, dripping pipes, old floodlights strung along the ceiling. On a table in the center sat a tape recorder identical to hers and a stack of files stamped Internal Review 1999. Dust coated everything except the top page. Fresh fingerprints. She pressed play. Keller's voice filled the space, younger, nervous. Hart says it's done. Girl's gone. The chief says we file it as missing. Price says he'll handle the paperwork. Nobody talks. Then another voice. Price is unmistakable. We all saw what happened, Tom. She fell. End of story. You want to keep your badge, forget it. The recording ended with a soft click, followed by silence, and then a faint, wet sound like footsteps in shallow water. Laura turned. The stairwell behind her was empty, but water dripped steadily from the top step. A single footprint formed in the dust. Bare, small. Her flashlight flickered. She backed toward the exit recorder, still playing in her hand. Another voice whispered through the speaker, female, fragile, trembling. Why did you leave me? The light went out. She climbed, tripping, scraping her palms on the concrete until she burst back into the open air. Dawn had begun to stain the horizon. She leaned against her car, shaking. The recorder still hissed softly, then went silent. Later that morning, she brought the tape straight to Internal Affairs. They promised to look into it. Price was placed on leave, pending review. Officially, she'd done her job. Unofficially, she knew how these stories ended quietly behind closed doors. That evening, she returned to the bridge one last time. The river moved slow now, heavy with silt from the drained well. She stood by the guardrail, wind biting her face, trying to feel anything like closure. The sun dipped below the trees. The first stars blinked through the clouds. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Detective Nash, she said. The pause was long enough for her heart to start counting it 1, 2, 3. Then, thank you. Emma's voice. Soft, clear, certain. The line clicked off. Laura lowered the phone, slowly staring at the river's surface. For the first time in months, the water looked still. Peaceful. She turned to leave, then froze. On the far side of the bridge, half hidden by the fog, a figure stood watching her. Tall, broad-shouldered, a uniform, Lieutenant Price. He raised his hand as if to wave, then stepped back and disappeared into the mist. Her radio crackled once more. Unit 3 responding, Hollow Creek Bridge. The same call, the loop that never ended. She looked down at her reflection in the water. For a moment, it wasn't hers. It was Emma's, smiling. The ripples swallowed it. In Hollow Creek, the case file now sits sealed for good. But locals still talk about the detective who couldn't let go, the one who brought the truth to light and then vanished from the force soon after. Sometimes at night, the bridge lights flicker. A phone somewhere rings once. And if you're standing close enough to the water, you can almost hear two voices whispering in the dark, one saying, "Help me," the other answering, "I'm here." Suspension papers arrive in a thin, white envelope. Just a few lines stamped with departmental insignia, but they carry the weight of everything Laura Nash has spent her career building. Administrative leave pending internal investigation, official language for exile. She signs the receipt, hands over her badge, and walks out of the station without looking back. Outside Hollow Creek breathes fog. The river hums somewhere beyond the trees, low and constant. People stare as she passes the detective who dug too deep, the woman who wouldn't let ghosts rest. At home, the file boxes wait where she left them. She spreads them across the kitchen table the same way she did the first night she reopened the cold case. But now there's more Keller's hidden tapes, Price's recorded threats, the internal memos she copied before they revoked her access. Patterns begin to surface. Timelines, signatures, missing evidence sheets. Each page another crack in the official story. The name that appears the most isn't Blake or Hart. It's Chief Samuel Rowe, the man who signed off on the original disappearance report back in 1999 and who is still chief today. Rowe's signature repeats like an echo, authorizing destroyed evidence, sealing reports, transferring officers. Keller, Hart, Price, all connected through him. Laura circles each name in red, following a trail that spans decades. The further she goes, the more the town's history rearranges itself. She digs into old property records and discovers that the Blake family home sits on land once owned by the Rowe Construction Company, the same company that built the bridge in 1989 and the police annex 2 years later. Financial documents show payments to Daniel Hart listed as a subcontractor. The ledger entries stop the month Emma disappeared. Money moved, records vanished, silence followed. Laura prints the files, pins them on the wall. A web takes shape, photos, arrows, receipts. In the center, a word written in heavy black ink, Hollow Creek Project. She remembers Keller's last words at the quarry, "We all buried it." That evening, she drives to City Hall. The clerk on duty, a man who recognizes her from the news, hesitates when she asks for the 1998-2000 project permits. "Those were lost in the flood," he says automatically. She leans on the counter, voice low. "Then tell me why the town paid Rowe Construction 6 figures for a project that never broke ground." He looks away. "Detective, I can't." "You can," she interrupts, "or I'll subpoena you once this goes federal." He sighs, disappears into the back room, and returns with a single folder, edges water-stained. Inside, she finds a blueprint, the original structural plan for the bridge, and beneath it, an addendum proposed maintenance chamber authorized by Chief S. Rowe. The same chamber she found under the bridge, the one Keller called the well. It wasn't maintenance, it was a vault. The report lists 2 personnel assigned to secure materials during construction, Officer Thomas Keller and Lieutenant David Price. She photographs everything, thanks the clerk, and walks out into the cool night with her pulse hammering. Back at her apartment, she cross-references the payroll entries. There's a third name attached to those same budget lines, Rowe Sr., but he died in 2002, replaced by his son, Samuel Rowe Jr., now chief. The dynasty never ended. It just changed uniforms. By midnight, she's sitting in her car outside the chief's house, a sprawling ranch on the hill overlooking the river. Light glows in one window. Inside, through the curtain gap, she can see him at his desk, phone to his ear, laughing softly. She switches on her recorder. He's speaking to someone, his tone confident, almost casual. No, Keller's gone. Price won't talk. Nash, she'll burn out like the rest. Laura hits record, heart pounding. Then he says it 5 words that freeze her blood, just like Emma Blake did. She presses her camera to the glass, snapping the photo through the curtain's gap. The chief turns slightly, as if sensing movement, but she's already ducking below the dash. When she looks again, he's walking away from the desk phone, still to his ear, heading toward the basement door. She waits 10 minutes before leaving. The next morning, she drives to meet a journalist she trusts, Aaron Sloan, a crime reporter who once covered corruption scandals in neighboring counties. They sit in the corner of a diner where no one knows them. She slides the folder across the table. He flips through it, eyebrows lifting. If half of this checks out, Hollow Creek's been laundering public funds through police contracts for 20 years. It's more than money, she says. It's cover-ups. People disappeared. Keller, Hart, Emma Blake. Maybe others. Aaron nods slowly. You're going to need proof strong enough to survive politics. She hands him a flash drive, Roe on tape. He exhales, pockets it. Give me 72 hours. When she steps outside, the sky has turned the color of pewter. Rain threatens again. Across the street, a black SUV idles, windows tinted. She feels the stare before she sees it. The car follows. When she drives off, mirrors her turns, never too close, never too far. At home, she checks the door locks twice, then sets her phone to record the sound of the street outside. At 2:37 a.m., the SUV drives by, once slow, deliberate. No headlights. She marks the time in her notebook. The following afternoon, Aaron calls. His voice is different, tight, urgent. Laura, we need to meet now. Downtown parking garage, level C. Don't come alone. She grabs her coat recorder and the backup copies of everything. The garage is empty when she arrives. Concrete echoes with every footstep. Aaron's car sits near the far column. She approaches cautiously, hand near her sidearm. He steps out, looking, pale eyes darting. You were right, he says. Roe's father covered an accident on the bridge during construction. A worker fell into the support shaft. They sealed it instead of reporting it. Emma found out her father was the one who died. That's why she went to meet Hart. Hart threatened to expose it unless they paid him. Margaret knew Keller knew, and Roe's department kept it buried. He opens his laptop, shows her the scanned documents, construction logs, payroll adjustments, a photo of the original crew, Roe Sr., Keller, Hart, Blake Sr. Laura stares at it. That's the secret they all kept. Aaron nods. It wasn't murder at first. It was guilt. Then his screen glitches. A pop-up. Connection lost. He frowns. That's weird. The squeal of tires cuts him off. Headlights flood the garage entrance. The black SUV screeches to a halt. 2 men in plain clothes step out. Roe Jr. follows behind them, calm, almost smiling. Detective Nash, he calls, voice echoing. You're trespassing on departmental jurisdiction. She raises her badge instinctively before remembering she doesn't have one anymore. You built the bridge, she says. You buried the evidence. And now you're trying to bury me. Roe's smile widens. You think anyone will believe you Keller's dead? Hart's dead. Your superior took his own life. You're a suspended detective obsessed with ghosts. That's what they'll print. Aaron steps forward, voice shaking. I have everything on record. Roe shrugs. Then I guess accidents run in this town. The men move. Laura grabs Aaron, drags him behind a concrete column. A shot ricochets off the wall. She fires back once, grazing a headlight. Glass explodes. The men retreat toward the SUV. Roe ducks behind the door, shouting something she can't hear. Then the tires scream again and the vehicle vanishes into the streetlight glare. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. The air smells of gunpowder and exhaust. Aaron breaks the silence. You just declared war on a police department. She holsters her gun. No, on a legacy. They drive to the next county that night, file a report with the State Bureau, hand over the recordings, and disappear into a motel under assumed names. The investigation opens quietly. Weeks pass. No headlines, no arrests. Until one morning, a local paper prints a short notice, Chief Samuel Roe found dead in his home, apparent suicide. No mention of the case, no mention of the tape. Aaron reads it aloud. Convenient ending. Laura stares out the motel window at the gray light crawling across the horizon. There's never an ending, just paperwork. She returns to Hollow Creek one last time, months later. The town feels smaller, quieter. The bridge has been repaired, new guardrails, new paint. The old scratches are gone. A plaque reads, "Dedicated to those who keep our town safe." She stands there, hands in her pockets, watching the water move beneath. She doesn't hear voices anymore. No phone calls, just wind steady and indifferent. And in her bag, she carries the final report, case hash 4799, homicide, corruption, resolved. But under her handwriting, she's added a note in red ink. The river doesn't forget, it just changes shape. She tosses the note into the current. It drifts away, swallowed by the same water that once hid every secret. When she turns back toward her car, a young officer is standing on the bridge watching her. "Detective Nash," he asks. She shakes her head. "Not anymore." He gestures toward the plaque. "They say the woman who solved the Blake case still comes here at night. You ever hear that?" Laura smiles faintly. People see what they need to see. She drives off, leaving the bridge behind. Weeks later, the State Bureau unseals new evidence from Hollow Creek. 5 missing person reports from the 1990s filed under the same project codes, each tied to row construction. Each marked closed. Insufficient evidence. The report lands on Laura's doorstep with no return address. Across the front, written in black marker, 3 words: "It never ended." The envelope arrived without a postmark, just a single line written in neat, deliberate strokes. State Bureau of Investigation consultancy request. Laura Nash stared at it for a long time before opening it. The Bureau hadn't called since Hollow Creek's scandal burned out of the headlines. She'd assumed they wanted her gone, another casualty of the cleanup, but the letter inside told a different story. Detective Nash, the Bureau has reopened the Hollow Creek inquiry under federal oversight. Your prior experience and possession of key evidence make your cooperation essential. Report to District Office 7 Section B 0900 hours Monday. No signature, just a code. She folded the paper, feeling the weight of inevitability. Monday morning, the Bureau's offices smelled of disinfectant and bureaucracy. The lobby was polished, impersonal. Everything Hollow Creek wasn't. Agent Evelyn Ramos met her in the hallway, tall, precise, the kind of investigator who never wasted words. "Glad you came," she said. "We've reviewed your notes. The corruption wasn't isolated. It extends through 3 counties." They entered a conference room lined with photos, aerial shots of construction sites, police rosters, bank ledgers. At the center of the board were 6 faces connected by red string: Keller, Hart, Price, Rowe, 2 others Laura didn't recognize. Ramos pointed to them. City engineer Clive Denton, missing since 2001. Officer Rachel Ward, last seen 2004. Both tied to row construction. Laura felt a slow chill. What connects them? Expense accounts. They were paid under something called Project Phoenix, same code as your bridge. Ramos slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs from a recently uncovered site, a sealed drainage tunnel discovered beneath the old industrial park north of Hollow Creek. The images showed shallow water, collapsed beams, and in the mud fragments of human bone. "Multiple remains," Ramos said. "DNA pending. We think this is where they moved the bodies after the well was compromised." Laura studied the photos, her pulse steady but cold. Rowe didn't kill to hide one accident. He built an entire system around it. Ramos nodded, and he had help. They traced the financing. The same shell company that paid Hart also funneled donations to local campaigns and police pensions. Every time a report threatened to surface, someone got promoted, transferred, or vanished. By midweek, the Bureau assigned Laura a field partner, Agent John Heller, former homicide out of Chicago. Calm, deliberate, the opposite of her restlessness. Their task map, every death connected to Project Phoenix. The pattern unfolded like rot spreading under paint. 12 victims across 15 years. Workers, witnesses, relatives. All ruled accidents or suicides. Each connected by one detail. All lived within driving distance of Hollow Creek. On the 4th day, they visited the drainage site. The air was damp, heavy with rust and decay. Technicians sifted through mud while floodlights cast long shadows across the tunnel walls. Laura crouched beside a newly uncovered section. Embedded in the silt was a rusted badge, HCPD hash 417. "Keller's old number," she said. "Heller photographed it. He tried to warn you." She nodded. or he left this for whoever came next. Back at the temporary command post, Ramos handed her a fresh report. The first DNA result was in. The remains matched Rachel Ward, the missing officer. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, manner homicide, estimated date within days of her resignation from Hollow Creek PD. Ward had been the only officer to file a complaint against Rowe's promotions board. The report vanished in 2004. Laura exhaled slowly. She got too close. Ramos said nothing. The truth was obvious. That night, Laura returned to her motel room near the highway. The table was covered with photographs, timelines, and names. She realized she'd built the same wall of evidence all over again. Different faces, same story. At 11:00 p.m., her phone vibrated. Unknown number. This time she didn't hesitate. Detective Nash, a voice asked, male mid-30s cautious. Who is this? I worked on the bridge rebuild last year. I found something in the foundation documents, sealed in plastic, buried in the concrete. Blueprints signed by Rowe Sr. and Denton. There's a list of coordinates, sites marked material disposal. You need to see this before they make it disappear. Where are you? Old Quarry East Side. Bring someone you trust. The line clicked dead. She grabbed her jacket recorder and Glock, then called Heller. We've got a live witness. Meet me at the quarry. When she arrived, the night was thick with fog, the same quarry where Keller had died months earlier. She parked headlights off. A single truck sat near the water's edge engine running. The driver's door was open. Heller, she called. No answer. She approached cautiously, weapon drawn. Inside the truck, the witness slumped over the wheel, eyes open, throat cut. Papers scattered across the seat, blueprints, permits, and a flash drive wrapped in plastic. She grabbed it, scanning the tree line. No movement, but she felt it, the sense of eyes in the dark. She ran to her car tires, spinning gravel as she tore down the road toward town. At a gas station, she plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The files loaded slowly images of maps, underground schematics, and a ledger titled Phoenix Inventory. Column after column of dates, initials, and descriptions, evidence, remains, cache. At the bottom of the list, one entry glowed in bold type. Item hash 4799 EB, transfer complete, authorized by S. Rowe Jr. They'd moved Emma Blake's remains from the well to the drainage site long after the official discovery. Someone inside the bureau was still protecting the old guard. She printed the file, hid the drive, and went straight to Ramos's office at dawn. You've got a leak, she said flatly. The witness is dead. Rowe's network is alive inside your investigation. Ramos locked the door. We suspected as much. That's why we brought you back. She slid another folder across the desk. Inside were internal messages intercepted from an encrypted server. The sender's handle, R. Ward 01. Laura frowned. Rachel Ward. She's dead. Someone's using her credentials, Ramos said. They're coordinating cover-ups under her name. The messages referenced Phoenix disposal sites across 3 states. Whoever was behind it had continued Rowe's operation, moving remains, erasing records, silencing witnesses. Ramos looked at her. We need to flush them out, and your bait. Laura felt the weight of it settle in her chest. You're asking me to go back to Hollow Creek. Yes, let them think you're working alone. They'll come to finish what Rowe started. She agreed. Not because she trusted the plan, but because there was nowhere else left to run. 2 nights later, she parked near the bridge again. The water below shimmered under the floodlights. She set the recorder on the hood of her car microphone open. This is Detective Laura Nash, she said quietly. Operation Phoenix Sting Hollow Creek Bridge, time 2300 hours. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of tires on gravel. Headlights appeared in the distance. 1 car, unmarked. Laura straightened heart-steady finger resting near the trigger. The car stopped 10 yards away. A man stepped out, late 40s, wearing a bureau windbreaker. Agent Heller, she called, relief, mixing with suspicion. You're early. He shook his head. You shouldn't have come alone. Something in his tone made her freeze. The headlights flickered once signal. A second car rolled out of the dark behind him, and another from the opposite lane. She whispered into her mic, Ramos, they're here. 3 vehicles. Static answered. Heller walked closer, palms open. They offered me immunity. You understand, don't you? They'd kill us both otherwise. Laura's voice stayed calm. What did you trade? He hesitated. The files. The flash drive burned in her pocket like a live coal. He reached out. Give it to me, Laura. End it. She stepped back. You already ended it. Headlights flared again. In the glare, she dropped behind the car door as a shot rang out, not hers. Heller staggered, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. From the second vehicle, a muzzle flashed. She fired twice, glass shattering. Tires screamed. Then silence. When she looked up, both cars were gone. Only Heller lay in the dirt, breathing shallowly. He looked at her, once mouth opening like he wanted to say something. Then, nothing. Backup arrived 15 minutes later, Bureau units led by Ramos herself. The area flooded with light radio's movement. Ramos knelt beside the body, eyes hard. "We'll clean this up," she said. Laura handed her the flash drive. "Don't let it vanish." Ramos nodded. "I won't." A week later, the Bureau released its findings, internal conspiracy dismantled. Multiple arrests pending. The report was clean too clean. Roe's name appeared only once in a footnote. Keller Hart Price reduced to statistics. Heller's death classified as crossfire. Laura was reinstated quietly, offered a commendation she refused. She packed her files into storage, locked the cabinet, and left the Bureau building without ceremony. The river still waited somewhere beyond the hills, endless and unchanged. Sometimes she drives past Hollow Creek at dusk, headlights off, windows down. The town looks peaceful again. Children play by the shore where the bridge casts its long shadow. But she knows what lies underneath the tunnels, the sealed chambers, the evidence that never made it into reports. Justice in Hollow Creek was never about truth. It was about containment. And every time she passes that stretch of water, she whispers to herself not a prayer, but a reminder. The dead don't speak. They wait. By the time the Bureau declared Hollow Creek resolved, the town was already rewriting its own history. Local papers printed photos of the restored bridge ribbon cuttings, smiling councilmen. The word corruption vanished from the headlines in less than a week. Officially, the case closed clean. Unofficially, it was bleeding underneath the surface. Laura Nash watched from her apartment window as the last camera crews left. She'd told herself she was done. No more statements, no interviews. But silence doesn't last when secrets start to leak. It began with one article, anonymous source, digital only. Whistleblower alleges federal cover-up in Hollow Creek. The piece quoted an internal agent claiming the Bureau falsified evidence to protect senior officials. Attached was a single image, a fragment of the Phoenix inventory list item, #4799, circled in red. The same document Laura had given to Ramos. Within 24 hours, every news feed carried it. Talk shows, podcasts, hashtags, #Phoenix cover-up trended for 3 straight days. The Bureau responded with the usual denial, ongoing investigation, misinterpreted data, but the leak hit harder than they expected. 2 senators called for an inquiry. Protesters gathered outside the district office holding signs that read, "Justice for Hollow Creek." Laura's phone rang nonstop. Journalists, victims' families, old colleagues. She ignored them all until one number appeared that she couldn't ignore: Evelyn Ramos. "Turn on Channel 7, Ramos said. Laura did. The screen showed a press conference. The Bureau spokesperson stood stiff behind a podium. Behind him, in the second row, was Ramos, stone-faced, silent. When the reporter asked whether evidence had been suppressed, the spokesperson hesitated, then said, "We are reviewing the actions of several agents, including former consultant Detective Laura Nash." Laura felt the room tilt. "They're framing me." Ramos's voice was low. "It's politics. They need distance." Distance from what? From the part they can't explain. The money trail goes higher than Roe ever reached. The call ended before Laura could reply. That night, 2 unmarked sedans idled across the street from her building. She watched their silhouettes in the reflection of her television. The next morning, she found her mailbox pried open and her door slightly ajar. Nothing missing, but everything moved half an inch off-center, just enough to prove someone had been there. She packed what mattered copies of the files, 2 recorders, 1 handgun, and drove east toward the state capitol. Aaron Sloan met her in a diner off the interstate, the same one where they'd first traded evidence. He looked older, thinner. The reporter's hunger replaced by caution. "They're eating each other alive," he said. "Half the Bureau wants to purge the case, half wants to weaponize it, and someone's leaking from the inside." "Not you." He shook his head. "No. But whoever it is, they've got everything, including your field notes." Laura took out a small flash drive and slid it across the table. Then, let's give them the rest. Publish it all. Aaron stared at the drive. You sure once it's out there's no pulling it back? You'll be burned. I'm already burned. He nodded, pocketed the drive, and left. That was the last time she saw him. 2 days later, his car exploded outside his apartment complex. The news called it a vehicle malfunction. Laura knew better. She disappeared that night, moving between cheap motels under an alias. From the shadows, she watched the Bureau implode resignations hearings, sealed transcripts. Ramos vanished from the press entirely. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from an encrypted address, ramos.e@protonmail. Subject line: They're closing it for real this time. Meet me where it started. No body, no signature. Just coordinates Hollow Creek Bridge. Laura hesitated only a moment before driving back. The town looked the same, but quieter, like a photograph left in the sun. At the bridge, floodlights still lined the railings. A maintenance crew had cut new access panels where the hidden chamber once was. But no workers remained. The site was empty. Ramos stood at the center of the span coat, whipping in the wind. They're dismantling the task force, she said. The files will be sealed under Homeland Infrastructure Security. You know what that means. No access for 50 years, Laura answered. Ramos nodded. They think burying it saves the institution. They don't care who died. Laura studied her. Why call me? Because they're going to erase you next. Your name, your reports. You'll become a rumor. Then we leak the rest. Ramos gave a tired smile. Already did. I sent everything to 3 independent outlets under an open source license. By morning, the entire Phoenix archive will be public domain. Laura exhaled a mix of relief and dread. You know what that means for you. Ramos shrugged. I stopped caring about careers the day I met Hollow Creek. A truck rumbled in the distance, headlights cresting the hill. Ramos turned. That'll be them. Bureau, she nodded once. They'll claim we went rogue. What happens now? Ramos looked out over the water. Now it burns. She slipped a small envelope into Laura's coat pocket, for when it does. The truck's engine grew louder. Ramos stepped back toward the railing, gaze fixed on the river below. Whatever happens, keep it out there. Don't let them bury it again. The headlights washed over them, blinding. When Laura's eyes cleared, Ramos was gone. Only her coat lay on the guardrail. The official story the next morning said Agent Evelyn Ramos died during a routine recovery operation. No mention of Laura, no mention of files. But across the internet, thousands of pages appeared under a single headline, The Phoenix Papers. They exposed everything: contracts, payments, death reports, bureau memos, the entire infrastructure of a cover-up that spanned 2 decades. Hollow Creek became national shorthand for systemic rot. Protests spread. Lawsuits followed. And in the middle of it all, one name resurfaced again and again: Detective Laura Nash, the whistleblower. She never confirmed or denied it. She left the state, changed her number, moved into a cabin near the mountains where no one asked questions. Sometimes she taught at local police academies under a pseudonym, lecturing on ethics. The cadets knew only fragments of her story. They called her the one who broke Hollow Creek. Months passed. The noise faded. Then, one evening, an envelope arrived, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single page from an official bureau memorandum. Case hash 4799, status reevaluation pending. Lead investigator assigned, Det L. Nash. She stared at it, disbelief hardening into a grim smile. They'd pulled her back again this time, not to silence her, but to use her name as proof the system could fix itself. Control through inclusion. The same trick every institution plays when cornered. She folded the paper, walked outside. The mountains burned orange under sunset. Somewhere below, rivers carved their slow, endless paths through stone washing, erasing, revealing. She whispered, half to herself, half to the ghosts of paperwork that never die. You can seal files. You can bury evidence, but you can't rewrite water. The wind carried the words downhill toward Hollow Creek, where the bridge still stood. New paint, new name. Same foundation poured over the bones of the old. And in the archives of the Bureau, beneath layers of digital locks and redacted lines, one file remained unaltered, its title frozen in the system. Project Phoenix unresolved. The Capitol hearing room smelled of dust and nerves. Rows of cameras blinked like slow heartbeats. Reporters whispered in clusters, waiting for the woman who dragged a forgotten town into the light. Detective Laura Nash stood at the double doors, hands steady, though her pulse wasn't. She'd spent months preparing for this statement, polished evidence condensed to a single folder labeled Phoenix Archive Summary. The same story now stripped of ghosts and myth, ready for the machinery of politics. When the clerk announced her name, every lens turned. Flashbulbs popped. She walked to the witness table, placed her right hand on the oath sheet, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. The phrase had never sounded so fragile. Across from her sat 12 members of the Oversight Committee. Flags framed them like theater curtains. The chairwoman, Senator Ellen Darrow, leaned forward. "Detective Nash," she said, voice crisp, "you are the primary source behind the Phoenix Files leak, correct?" Laura met her gaze. "I provided the evidence that proved the leak authentic." A murmur rippled through the room. Darrow nodded slightly. "Then let's begin at the beginning. In your words, what was Project Phoenix?" Laura unfolded the first page. Phoenix was a covert network of financial and operational cover-ups stretching from the Hollow Creek Police Department into federal infrastructure contracts. It began as an accident report, a construction death in 1989, and evolved into a decades-long system for concealing negligence, laundering funds, and silencing witnesses. Screens behind her, lit with images, the bridge blueprint, Keller's tapes, payroll ledgers. She spoke evenly, for her voice carrying through the chamber. When the first worker died, Chief Rose Sr. used municipal funds to pay off his partner. When Emma Blake discovered the payment years later, she became a liability. Each death that followed kept the foundation intact, literally and politically. Senator Michaels, the ranking member, adjusted his glasses. "Detective, these are serious accusations. You're implying federal oversight failed for 30 years. "I'm not implying," she said. "I'm reading your own audit trails." He stiffened. Laughter flickered from the press rows. The sound was small but dangerous. Darrow tapped her pen for silence. "Proceed." Laura described the bridge, the well, the chamber. The air grew heavier with every name. Keller, Hart, Rowe, Ramos, Price. She didn't spare herself either, how she'd broken protocol, leaked evidence, lost her badge. "I wasn't chasing ghosts," she finished. "I was chasing accountability, and it always ran uphill." The senators questioned for hours, dates, chain of custody motive. She answered every one, sometimes reading straight from documents, sometimes simply staring them down. When they broke for recess, Darrow called her aside. "Off the record," she said quietly. "Do you believe the Bureau knew?" Laura looked past her out the window, where the city shimmered in noon heat. "I believe knowing and choosing to forget are the same crime." In the hallway, reporters swarmed microphones thrust forward. "Detective Nash, do you regret leaking classified data?" She answered without slowing. "Regret is for people who can afford to sleep." By afternoon, the committee reconvened behind closed doors. Outside, journalists debated whether she was hero or traitor. Inside, senators argued over language systemic failure or isolated misconduct, words that would decide whether Hollow Creek lived in textbooks or footnotes. When they called her back, Darrow's tone had softened. "Detective, one last question. After everything you've uncovered, do you still believe in the institution of law enforcement?" Laura paused. Cameras zoomed in. "I believe in truth," she said finally. "The uniform was supposed to serve it. Somewhere along the line, we started serving the uniform instead." Silence held for a full beat before Darrow thanked her and struck the gavel. "This hearing stands in recess." That evening, the news cycle exploded. Every channel looped the same clip. Laura saying we started serving the uniform instead. Some called it courage, others betrayal. Talk shows turned her into a brand, the detective who broke the blue wall. Book offers, threats, invitations all arrived within hours. She ignored them all. Ramos's envelope still sat unopened in her jacket pocket. She hadn't touched it since that night on the bridge. Now, in a hotel room overlooking the Capitol, she slid it open with her pocket knife. Inside was a single flashcard labeled Contingency B. She loaded it into her laptop. A video opened Ramos recorded weeks before her death. If you're watching this, the Bureau buried the hearings. Phoenix wasn't one project. It was a template. Bridges, tunnels, military contracts. They'll settle Hollow Creek, but they'll replicate the mechanism somewhere else. Follow the money. The file path is encoded under my name in the Bureau archive. Use it if they start rewriting the narrative. Laura closed the laptop slowly. Outside, the city's sirens blended into traffic, the endless hum of power protecting itself. She understood now that the hearing had never been the end, just another layer of control. The next morning, she met with an independent oversight journalist team, young, relentless, immune to intimidation. She handed them the card. If anything happens, she said, release it. They asked if she was afraid. She smiled without warmth. Fear's the only honest witness left. Weeks passed. Congress issued its report, Significant Misconduct at Municipal and Regional Levels. No conclusive evidence of federal complicity. Hollow Creek received funding for a memorial park. The Bureau promised reforms, and the world moved on. But reform is paperwork. Truth is repetition. Late one night, Laura received an email. No sender-only coordinates and a timestamp U.S. Route 19 bridge inspection site, 0237 hours. The irony wasn't lost on her. She drove out anyway, old habits. At the site, she found a fresh construction plaque stamped with the same contractor logo that once belonged to Rowe Construction, only the name had changed Phoenix Infrastructure Group. The cycle had already restarted. She took a photo, sent it to the oversight team, then deleted every trace of the message. Some truths only survive by staying unclaimed. Months later, the Senate Archive released the official transcript of the hearing. Buried halfway through was a brief exchange that most viewers missed. Senator Darrow, Detective Nash, do you believe these events could happen again, Nash? They already are. You just haven't named them yet. Today, the Hollow Creek Bridge carries more traffic than ever. Tourists take photos of the plaque unaware that its foundation sits on decades of silence. Somewhere far from there, in a quiet apartment lined with case files, Laura Nash writes the opening line of her testimony for the next fight. The problem was never one bad town. It was the belief that forgetting makes us safe. She saves the document at prints one copy and locks it in a drawer marked Future Hearing. Outside, another siren rises in the distance. New case, new headline, same pattern. And Laura, the detective who refused to forget, starts again. History always cleans itself up. That's what Laura Nash learned in the months after the hearings. Headlines, faded lawsuits settled, and the word Phoenix became a footnote buried in appropriations reports. The Bureau rolled out reforms, new ethics boards, new oversight units, fresh slogans about transparency. Every press release sounded like redemption, but the smell of bureaucracy never really changed. Laura stayed off the grid, living under her own shadow. She'd turned down book deals, refused every documentary. She wanted distance. But distance is a luxury truth doesn't allow. It started with a single envelope slid under her door one morning. Inside, a photograph of a construction site in Nevada. Dust cranes and a concrete pylon stamped with a familiar emblem, Phoenix Infrastructure Group. Below it, 3 words written in marker, it never ended. She packed her bag before the coffee cooled. 2 flights and 1 rental car later, she was standing in the desert heat, watching men pour new foundations into the sand. A foreman told her they were building a federal logistics hub classified under transportation. Same design specs as Hollow Creek, down to the drainage schematics. The same blueprint, reborn under a new contract code. She took photos, recorded audio, and mailed copies to 3 separate reporters before the sun went down. By the time she returned to her motel, an email awaited her. Stop digging, or you'll be next. No sender. Same font, same threat she'd seen before. She didn't stop. When she walked into the Bureau offices in D.C. a week later, the security desk froze. She wasn't on the visitor list, but names still carried weight here. Within an hour, she was in a conference room with Deputy Director Marks, one of the men who'd survived the Hollow Creek fallout. His smile was polite, practiced. You've made quite a career out of being difficult, he said. I'm not here for a career. He poured coffee into 2 paper cups. Then, what are you here for? Phoenix, too, she said. You've resurrected it under new funding. Nevada, Arizona, maybe Texas. Same contractors, same paper trail. Marks leaned back, expression unreadable. You assume the world stopped building bridges because one went bad. I assume corruption doesn't retire, it rebrands. He laughed softly. You think you can stop the federal infrastructure machine? Do you know how many agencies sign off on those contracts? Truth isn't a switch, detective. It's a current. You can't hold it forever without getting burned. She stood. Then I'll let it burn. His smile faded. You leak anything again, we won't clean it up this time. She walked out without answering. Weeks later, news stories began to break small local pieces, first, then national. Unexplained discrepancies in Phoenix Group contracts, anonymous documents, aerial photos, whistleblower accounts. Each one pushed a little deeper. Laura recognized the phrasing. Ramos's old network was still alive, still feeding the press from the inside. Public anger reignited. Congressional committees reopened oversight. Darrow returned to the podium, gray-haired, now voice sharper. Hollow Creek was not an end, she told the cameras. It was a warning. Laura watched from her apartment lights off. For once, she didn't feel alone. The reforms that followed weren't grand. They never are. New auditing software, mandatory transparency portals, a rule requiring third-party verification on federal infrastructure bids. It sounded procedural dull the way real change always does, but for the first time in decades, the system blinked. People looked. Questions stuck. And still in the background, the same hum power adjusting, disguising itself, surviving. For every scandal exposed, 10 new projects rose with cleaner logos and deeper pockets. Hollow Creek had become both cautionary tale and blueprint, a reminder of what could be fixed and what never would. One morning, months later, Laura received a subpoena, not a threat, but a call. The National Ethics Commission wanted her testimony for their final report on systemic reform. Not another hearing, she muttered to herself. But she went. Habit, maybe. Or duty. The room was smaller this time. Fewer cameras, no flags, just a semicircle of commissioners and a single microphone. The chairwoman smiled kindly. Detective Nash, you've been here before. Laura nodded. Seems I live here. Then help us write the ending, the woman said. What should this investigation leave behind? Laura paused, the hum of the recorder loud in her ears, and understanding that truth isn't a destination, it's maintenance. You don't solve corruption, you manage it. You check it, you name it, and you keep naming it until the next person takes the job, because the moment you think it's over, it starts again. The commissioners wrote quietly. No applause, no outrage, just the sound of pens scratching against paper. The right kind of silence. That night, she walked alone through the city. Washington's monuments glowed like polished ghosts. Somewhere beyond the river, a construction site buzzed under floodlights. Cranes turning slowly against the skyline. The sound reminded her of Hollow Creek's bridge. Metal grinding foundations, settling the endless work of holding something heavy above water. She thought about everyone who hadn't survived the weight Keller Hart Ramos even row in his own way. Every one of them, part of the structure, some cracks, some beams. The system never mourned its supports. It simply poured new concrete over the old. At the edge of the reflecting pool, she sat down, pulled a notebook from her coat, and began to write, not a report this time, but a record. A manual for whoever would inherit the next impossible case. Rule 1. Evidence is immortal, only if you make copies. Rule 2. Whistleblowers don't need faith, they need stamina. Rule 3. Never wait for permission to tell the truth. She closed the book and placed it in a public archive box across from the Bureau building. No name, no return address, just a label in red ink for the next one. Then she walked away. Months passed. Hollow Creek reopened the bridge under a new name, the Memorial Crossing. Children rode bikes across it. Tourists took selfies. No one mentioned Phoenix. But under the concrete plaque, another smaller one appeared overnight, unofficial, unsigned. To those who refused to forget, nobody claimed responsibility. Laura never saw it in person, but a photograph of it reached her by mail. No note, just the picture. She kept it on her wall. By the following year, the Ethics Commission released its final report. It acknowledged 22 confirmed deaths, 14 indictments, and structural reforms implemented. But the last paragraph, the one Laura wrote, was the only part anyone remembered. The greatest danger in a democracy is not corruption, it's fatigue. The moment citizens stop looking, the powerful stop hiding. The line spread across social media, carved into editorials quoted in classrooms. She never claimed it publicly, but every time she heard it, she felt something almost like peace. Years later, when a journalist tracked her down in the mountains to film a retrospective, she agreed to one condition: no makeup, no lights, no music, just questions and air. He asked, "Do you think Hollow Creek changed anything?" She thought for a long moment, then said, "It changed me. That's usually all the world can handle at once." He pressed, "And what would you tell the next detective who finds another bridge like yours?" Laura looked past the camera into the distance where fog drifted through the trees. "Dig," she said. "Even when they tell you the ground is clean, especially then." The recording faded on her face, half lit by the mountain dusk, tired calm, still dangerous. Down in Hollow Creek, the river kept moving. The old current carried new reflections, cars, clouds, fragments of sky. Beneath it, foundations shifted but held. Water forgets nothing. And somewhere deep in the Bureau archives, the Phoenix files remained sealed but not deleted. Waiting for the next hand, the next voice, the next woman too stubborn to let silence finish the story. The archive smelled of paper and static. 2 decades after the Hollow Creek hearings, the Bureau's storage facility had become a mausoleum for secrets, 4 floors of gray boxes, stacked higher than the reach of light. Inside, the hum of dehumidifiers replaced conversation. No one came here except interns, data clerks, and the occasional investigator chasing ghosts from footnotes. On a rain-heavy morning in 2045, Special Agent Mara Ellison signed the logbook pen, scratching under the column marked research authorization. She was 32, methodical, the kind of agent who believed everything had a paper trail if you followed it far enough. Her assignment was routine, digitize unsolved cold cases from the pre-digital era. Case hash 4799 sat near the bottom of the list, its label half peeled, the ink faded to sepia. She lifted the lid. Inside folders brittle with age, a cracked audio cassette, and a small black notebook stamped with one word in red ink for the next one. Mara frowned. The handwriting on the evidence log was elegant but unfamiliar. Det L. Nash. The name stirred something from training materials, a footnote in Bureau ethics seminars. The instructor had called her the conscience of Hollow Creek. She flipped open the notebook. First page. Rule 1. Evidence is immortal only if you make copies. The second whistleblowers don't need faith, they need stamina. By the third, her pulse had quickened. It wasn't a diary. It was a manual written like a confession. Margins filled with sketches of bridges, grids, coordinates. Each page ended with a signature line left blank as if waiting for someone else to sign. At the back pocket, an SD card sealed in plastic, label Contingency B, Ramos. She turned it over in her hand, hesitating. Technically, personal artifacts were off limits, but curiosity is the seed of every investigation. She slipped it into her tablet. The file tree bloomed on the screen. Phoenix Archive Addendum, do not erase. Thousands of documents, procurement ledgers, inspection photos, encrypted memos. The first folder was dated November 14th, 2025, the day the Hollow Creek Bridge reopened. The reports didn't stop there. They kept going, 2028, 2031, 2037. Each linked to new infrastructure projects across the country, same contractors under new names, same budget codes. Phoenix had never died. It had multiplied. Mara leaned back, the realization sinking like cold water. Every decade, a new layer of oversight, a new agency acronym, but the pattern stayed identical. Cost overruns, falsified safety inspections, missing personnel. Hollow Creek hadn't been an isolated wound. It was a prototype. She checked the metadata. Last modification 4 months ago. Someone was still updating it. Her intercom buzzed. Agent Ellison audit teams heading down for random spot checks. She closed the files, hid the SD card inside her notebook, and signed out the box. On paper, it would read routine digitization. In truth, she was already rewriting her own orders. 2 nights later, she drove to the river. Hollow Creek looked different now. Modern, paved, commercialized. The bridge shimmered with LED lighting, tourist drones hovering overhead. Beneath the memorial plaque, the smaller one remained tarnished but legible to those who refused to forget. Mara touched the metal. "You left breadcrumbs," she whispered. She opened her phone, typed the coordinates from Nash's notebook into the mapping app. A red dot blinked 50 miles north, an unfinished dam site registered under Phoenix Energy Consortium. Another foundation. Another secret, waiting to harden in concrete. She drove there before dawn. The site was deserted, except for floodlights and cranes frozen mid-motion. In the dust near the fence, she found a shipment tag half-buried material transfer unit B4799, the code from Nash's original case. She photographed everything, sent encrypted copies to 3 addresses, one to Bureau Oversight, one to an independent watchdog network, one to herself under an alias. Rule 1 honored. A voice startled her from behind. "You shouldn't be here." She turned. A man in a hard hat, late 50s contractor badge flashing under the lights. "Inspections tomorrow," he said. "You from D.C." She flashed her bureau ID. "Spot audit?" He hesitated. "They told us no audits till next quarter." "They changed the schedule," she said evenly. "Problem?" He studied her, then shrugged. "No problem. Just thought we buried this mess years ago." The phrasing hit her. Buried. When he walked away, she recorded his license plate. Back in her motel, she cross-checked the number through internal databases. The contractor was Samuel Rowe III, the grandson. Phoenix had become a family business again. She stared at the screen until sunrise. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Nash's words echoed, "You don't solve corruption. You manage it." The next morning, Mara filed an official anomaly report citing potential procurement irregularities. She knew what would happen. Redirection delays, maybe a quiet transfer, Bureau survival instinct. So she prepared the second option. She packaged the data from Ramos's card and Nash's notebook into a compressed file named nextfile.zip and uploaded it to a public cloud under a deadlink set to auto-release if her bureau credentials were ever deactivated. At noon, her supervisor called her upstairs. "Ellison, who authorized your trip to Nevada." "Field verification," she said. He frowned. "Stay in your lane. Digitize. Don't dramatize." She left the office with her badge feeling heavier than usual. 3 days later, internal security froze her login. The auto-release triggered exactly as planned. Within hours, investigative journalists received encrypted downloads titled "The Next File." The story broke before the Bureau realized what it was. Phoenix Energy under federal scrutiny, echoes of Hollow Creek. New evidence suggests decades of contract fraud. Whistleblower source unknown. Mara watched the headlines roll across public screens in the lobby. She expected fear, maybe regret. Instead, she felt calm. Systems crumble the same way they're built, one layer at a time. Security escorted her from the building that afternoon. Suspension indefinite. The same script Nash once lived. History repeating, but improved this time digital. That night, she returned to the bridge one last time. Rain fell in silver threads over the river. She placed the black notebook on the stone railing pages, fluttering in the wind. "You said evidence is immortal if you make copies," she whispered. "I made thousands." In the distance, sirens wailed, not chasing her, just the sound of a city reminding itself it was still alive. She watched the current swallow the reflections of lights, then turned and walked toward her car. Before leaving, she looked back once. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a silhouette standing where she'd left the notebook. Not a ghost, not superstition, just the outline of someone else arriving to start reading. Weeks later, the Bureau reinstated her under new leadership. Quietly, no ceremony. The official report called the leak unfortunate but valuable. Oversight expanded again. Another circle completed. And in the basement of the new ethics division, an empty shelf bore a single label waiting for a future case number. #4821, Phoenix Reassessment. A young clerk passed by, noticed the space, and asked, "Why's that shelf reserved?" The archivist smiled. "For the next one." Above them, the river kept moving across counties through new cities under fresh bridges poured with the same restless concrete. It glittered under light, quiet, and endless, carrying with it every reflection of those who once refused to forget. End of Hollow Creek Chronicles.